Now there is a little bit of debate about what to do next. I kind of like to have the tank on. I like to have the gas tank on for grip and all that stuff, and it's just easier than to put this piece down, and you actually have to put this carburetor plate down before you put the cylinder head down, otherwise you have trouble. Let's check out the gas tank. Not so sure I trust the fuel line, but you know what? It's already installed. Leave it be. Oh, that looks like it'll be fine, but missing a rubber bumper here. I wonder if that's in the kit. So this kind of a rubber and plastic pieces bag here, and it looks like there's a bumper in here. That looks like she should fit. Now, you know, I'm looking at my cases going, shoot. So the big part goes in. A little grease to make it easier. I know, I do like my grease. Usually you can't directly push them in, you have to grab and pull. Grab. There you go. This little tab you can cut off. While we're doing this sort of stuff, there's this piece that goes in the case here. That's the way. This does not do a very good job of clicking in. Won't really matter. The spring's going to hold it in anyway. This goes on the carb plate, as does that. Carb plate and shroud. These shrouds are pretty cheap, but you know what? They're fine. Fits good. Same deal here. These should be a little easier. Boom. Boom. 1, 2. Yeah, sure. I don't really know if I'm expected to get that in there. Yep, just goes in. There you have that. There's another rubber bumper thingy here that goes there that most often gets lost. Got it? Yeah, I got it. It's in here. Just a piece of rubber. You can use like 1/4-inch rubber tube or something like that. 1/4-inch inner diameter rubber tube works fine. Usually kind of a pain to get the tank in here because you have to get that in. But you know what? That went right nice. Okay. That just made the job far simpler. Pull the fuel line through, make sure the throttle cable goes through. Carb plate goes down. Now we can put some screws in here. So let's put the carb plate screws in first. These are short machine bolts. M5. I prefer blue Loctite on this sort of stuff. Forgetting one other thing. Before we put this down, might as well do the electrical stuff, because that's all right in here, and that's just going to complicate your life. For here we can just put in the switch, which just pops in. Which just pops in. We look for our positive and the wires are here with the coil. I'll put the ignition coil to the side for the moment. Now this cable is awfully long, it just goes to ground. That cable is awful short. Don't know what they were thinking. So there's a hole over here, which these things are theoretically supposed to go through. take the rubber things off first. The red line, double-ended spades, the red line is going to come through here. That's going to go to our ignition coil. That's our kill wire. Put the rubber on it if you want. Doesn't really matter top or bottom. Actually, I prefer to put the ground on the bottom. This ground wire is too long. You really need a short one. I happen to have a short one, but if you need to shorten it, shorten it. Wire goes to the side there. I like to put the chassis towards the bottom, just my preference here. And then the hot wire, I guess you can consider it, to the coil. Tight. There it goes. Just have to wiggle it. Okay. So now our electrical stuff is done. All those connections are done. Now we can put the carb plate down. This line does have a place to seat in the trigger. Basically pretty obvious. There's a hole there. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, make sure your throttle line is run correctly. And it's fully seated in the trigger. That's fine. Good. Now we're ready to put the cylinder head down. Get our rings. We need rings and circlips. Don't forget the circlips. So these clips are the point of contention and debate. Anyway, the ear here is a little bit too long. And it's possible that it may pop out if that ear catches enough momentum when it's going 13,000 RPM to squeeze it open or closed or something like that. So we want to remove that ear just with a Dremel. And you don't have to remove the whole thing, just a significant part of it. So a little hot tip, as you're grinding this, don't lose that little piece. If you do lose it, it's probably in your crankcase somewhere. And since you do not want that in the crankcase, in fact this is kind of the whole point of getting rid of this, is to make sure it doesn't end up in the crankcase. So short is good. So the two most frustrating things I think about putting a chainsaw together can be the crankcase and the circlips. If you aren't practiced, it takes a while, and if you are practiced, you're still going to end up swearing anyway. There. Click. I make sure the ear is up or down depending. Let's go down. Just like that. These are officially a pain. They just are. So what you do is practice off the saw. And I'm serious, just practice. I stick it in here, go from the bottom. I have my thumbnail on this, holding this in. So as it's going around, my thumbnail is going to guide it in. Didn't work. Try her again. This one has a little bit extra spring to it. Not necessarily a bad thing, but it definitely makes it annoying. There we go. Get it to roll. And right as it comes past my thumbnail here, it's going to go in and go click. There. Just the last little tip there, you can... And it's got to roll. It just has to roll evenly. There you go. That is held. Perfect. The arrow is going to the exhaust. Now let's put the rings on. If you're a real nutcase, you can put a little 2-cycle oil on the rings. Really doesn't need much. There's the positioning pins, and this scoop out there needs to, well, correspond with the positioning pins, basically. Right there. Nice. Again, 2-cycle oil. Rings are on. Now we need the cylinder and the boot. And the clamp. Which is for some reason in with the brake parts. Don't forget this too. Okay, clamp. Now I happen to like a little Loctite 518 anaerobic sealer on the boot. Now this is one part that you could get really nutty and say, gee, I'm going to use OEM. I wouldn't blame you. So our boot here with a clamp. Basically have to loosen the clamp all the way. At least you do on the OEM one. And believe it or not, the best place to put it is actually underneath. Cylinder. So one thing I do notice immediately, these tabs on the side, they're supposed to kind of grab these little nubs. Not really grab, but they're alignment nubs. That's all that they are. And that is indeed fully seated. And you want to make sure that this is level, but it sure likes those, it looks like those alignment nubs are not exactly lined up. As long as we're level here, it'll be alright. On the OEM one, they definitely line up a little bit better. Little blue Loctite on the screw. Clamp it on down. Now, again, the OEM one, there's a spacer in here. You clamp it right on down to where the spacer touches, and then that's it. This is tight, as is. And you can see visually that it's fully seated on the intake there. Alright, since we're doing a base gasket delete here, I've already shined up this surface, but I still want to take some brake cleaner and make sure there's no oils on there. I'll put the impulse line on later. These look like cylinder head bolts. Now, one thing with a base gasket delete is that if you are going to be putting the bolts down further, even 20 thousandths further than expected, you have to make sure there's room. So for some reason my kit came with one extra long bolt. I'm going to supplement. These are M5 20mm long cylinder head bolts. So I definitely have room there. Definitely have room there. Again, you just want to make sure that these things aren't going to bottom out on you before they tighten up the cylinder head. Got room there. Blue Loctite on all the bolt holes. Don't have to, but again, I'm kind of paranoid about this. Make sure our cylinder head is clean. Get out our... Now, you can actually use Loctite 515 or 518 for this. I'm going to use this 1184 stuff, 3-bond 1184. Just because Farmer Jones recommends it, so you might as well. And you want, like, the super thinnest of thin layers on here. Because you do not want it gooping out and oozing out anywhere on you. Super thin layer. Place that back. Okay. Same thing on the cylinder head. I make sure to get the narrow flanges a little bit thicker. The outside here. The wide flanges I'm not so worried about, but these narrow spots, yeah. So you do let that skin up just a little bit. We've got the circlips in. They're orientated properly. The rings are on. Good to go there. Let that skin for a minute. So as this is skinning up, one thing I'll mention is that you do not have to do this. You can just use the base gasket, put the base gasket down, seat the whole thing. You do not have to do a base gasket delete. I am doing that on this particular saw because the squish was so huge. And eventually I may take this off and actually mill this down or mill the cylinder or something like that to optimize the squish even further. But for right now, we're going to focus on what you basically can do right out of the box without any super special tools. So now that this is skinned up for a little bit, don't see any voids in the goop here. I don't have ring compressors, so we're going to do this the old-fashioned way, by hand. Line it up with the ring end. Usually I like to pull the ring towards me a little bit. Then if you can get one end in, you effectively get the back side of the ring in, then get one ring end in, and then get the other. There we go. There's one, two. There she goes. Make sure there's no gaps in the goop. Then you can bring your piston to bottom dead center. And slide around down. The clamp is actually hitting the case. On the OEM ones it doesn't do that. So I've got to pull this off. Or at least partially off here. And undo it and move the clamp over to the side. So this is not an optimal position, but mostly because the impulse line is here and you don't want to wear through the impulse line, but or at least it will be there. But it's what we got for the moment. There's no gaps in the goop. And now hopefully we go down. Let's see here. Screws in. 1, 2, 3, 4, and on down. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now what you can do, like I do, now you can put some oil down here. And give her a spin. She works, she doesn't hang a ring. So far so good on that.